Hello, hello, good evening. It's me again. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. First of all, I must say that band was fabulous. I mean, this is not the library of my childhood because I don't ever remember hearing a band like that in the library or a band, period. So thank you for everyone who put that together, and thank you to the band. Welcome to you all, and thank you for coming out to celebrate the 150th anniversary. Yes. Of the founding of one of our city's great institutions, the Kansas City Public Library. My name is Denisha Snell, and I serve on the library's Board of Trustees. I am both honored and grateful to be here with all of you at this special moment in our library's long history. The coming year is going to be a special one as we celebrate the 150th year of the library. There will be a series of talks by some very prominent authors, a full menu of other special activities and events, including programs by notable children's authors and illustrators, a rotation of compelling art exhibits, a birthday-themed summer reading program next June, July, and August, birthday parties at all 10 of our library locations, and you may have seen this if you spent any time in downtown. We have our very own library-themed streetcar. Yes, woo woo. We have so much to be proud of, and as the library has repeatedly been recognized locally, regionally, and nationally for its excellence and importance in the community. Most notably, our library won the National Medal for Museum and Library Service, the nation's highest honor for libraries. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of the library employees, the library leadership. None of that would be possible without all of the work that they put in on a daily basis to keep the libraries, each of our branches running. So thank you very much for all the programming and everything that you all do. It's so important. So let's take a moment to learn more about our library's incredible history.
The Kansas City Public Library has been a hub in our community for 150 years. A safe place of discovery for people of all ages, backgrounds, and beliefs. So let's go back in time to hear some of the stories that led us to today. The Kansas City Board of Education founded the library in 1873. The Kansas City Public Library has been a hub in our community for 150 years. A safe place of discovery for people of all ages, backgrounds, and beliefs. So let's go back in time to hear some of the stories that led us to today. The Kansas City Board of Education founded the library in 1873. We sold tickets to literary parties, received a $490 donation from the Ladies Centennial Association, and used the money to buy 100 encyclopedias. That first collection was built one book at a time for the Kansas City Public School District.
By 1881, the collection had grown to include 2,000 books from many genres. Superintendent James Greenwood hired Carrie Westlake Whitney as the library's first head librarian. Whitney grew the collection to 40,000 volumes, established what was considered the first children's library in the country, and made all collections free to the public.
In 1897, the first building ever built in Kansas City, specifically to be a library, had 2.5 floors, an art gallery, a museum, and a bookbindery. It was in this exact library that Walt Disney started his career. It meant so much to him that he wrote a letter in 1937 to say thank you.
In the 1980s, the Kansas City Public Library separated from the school district and built new branches, offering the community expanded spaces and services. As the evolution of technology sped up in the 90s, the library matched pace, migrating the card catalog from print to digital and adding public computers for its patrons.
By the 2000s, the library kept growing, adding more branches, staff, and collections. They even added an online location. They started hosting live events so people could meet authors, poets, artists, civic leaders, and scholars for free.
Thinking back to my first times I came to the library, I remember going into these different spaces with lots of books, lots of color, a designated spot for kids to read. You know, it just unlocked a lot of different worlds for me since as early as I can remember.
It's very rewarding to work in a library because every day you help someone access information, and sometimes you hear the joys and laughter of story time, and it really helps you feel that you are providing a great service to your community.
The library is a critical piece of the community puzzle. Libraries are much more than books. Libraries offer a place for community engagement and convening, a civic discourse, programming for children, youth, and families.
I liken this library system to the giving tree in my relationship with it. At every age, I would come and get something different from the tree. It's been huge for me at different phases of my life, and that will continue.
Information is important for economic development and health and workforce development, but also to help people with their personal interests.
Having access to the library is important for all walks of life. For a lot of people that are disconnected from the internet at home, the library may be that resource where you come to connect.
We have seen an expanded need for patrons to use a public telephone. They're calling for jobs, they're calling for services, they're calling friends and family.
One of the best ways I've seen the library adapt to my needs personally was the introduction of the Libby app. I can now access things as an audio learner much more quickly.
It's so much fun to be able to bring the library out to the community where our patrons are meeting with other friends and neighbors. You can check out movies, books, laptops, hotspots for Wi-Fi. There's something for everyone on a bookmobile.
I strongly believe libraries will continue to help shape the future of this city. And in some ways it will be the same. In some ways the library will have evolved to continue to meet the needs of the community.
We're going to continue to stay the course. The Library of the Future is one where I believe we're going to continue to provide everyone with equal access to information and defend everyone's rights to that equal access as well.
The library will always be another safe space where people can be together. No matter who you are, where you come from, or where you're going, you belong at the Kansas City Public Library. After 150 years of discovery, the story keeps going. The library will keep growing and changing to meet you where you are, so we can make our way to the next century together.
The library is a safe space. It's community.
Connection. Fun. It's our future.
Where I discovered love through bell hooks, read a compelling version of Dante's Inferno via Gloria Naylor, and embraced the vision of Afrofuturism through the writings of Octavia Butler. I look forward to the library maintaining and building on its essential role as a leader and driving force in the community. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce one of Kansas City's true literary treasures, Glenn North, who will present an original poem in honor of the library's 150th year. Glenn is the Director of Inclusive Learning and Creative Impact for the Kansas City Museum, and he is the first Poet Laureate of the historic 18th and Vine Entertainment District. Please join me in welcoming Glenn North.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you, Denisha, for that introduction. At the luncheon earlier today, I was sharing with the audience that I fell in love with the library at a very early age. My father was a huge sports fan, loved the Royals, loved the Kings, loved the Chiefs. But on Saturdays, our ritual was he would take me to the library. And I remember one Saturday, he had some tickets to a Royals game. He's like, hey, man, let's go to the Royals game. And I was like, no, you said you were going to take me to the library. And he was like, I cannot believe you are my son. But he took me to the library. And I remember on that particular Saturday, I was 10 years old at the time. I was in the 5th grade. And I came across a book called The Catcher in the Rye. None of my teachers had suggested it. I didn't know that it was considered to be one of the great American novels. I just happened upon it and I opened it, and the first line said, if you really want to hear about it, and I really did want to hear about it. I felt like Holden Caulfield was talking to me. And I remember that afternoon sitting down and reading the book in one sitting, and just feeling so much joy afterwards that I knew at that point that I wanted to be a writer. So I just really want to thank the library for giving my life direction. And I'm really honored to share this poem with you. It's called All Are Welcome Here, and it's an Abecedarian poem. An Abecedarian is a 26-line poem, and each line starts with a letter of the alphabet. And I figured this would be a great form for a library because we wayfind through the process of alphabetizing, and information is in this library from A to Z. So I just thought that it would be appropriate. All are welcome here, an Abecedarian for the Kansas City Public Library's 150th anniversary. And it opens with a quote from an essay from tonight's keynote speaker, Tommi Laitio. And the quote says, in English, the notion of conviviality easily has an association to festivity or happiness. In Spanish, convivencia has a contentious dimension. Convivencia emphasizes the constant need and commitment to practice the way we share space and resources with others. And that's from the essay, Learning Grounds of Conviviality. All are welcome here. This sacred space where infinite shelves provide harbor for brilliant minds, where books come alive and knowledge resides on countless pages. The wisdom of the ages becomes material, and with convivial spirits we come seeking community. This temple we call a library has offered us 150 years of discovery and has helped us define humanity. This place of ecstasy and agony, comedy and tragedy urges us to engage valiantly with those who differ from us radically. This fertile terrain of street slang and elevated diction produces a fabulous friction filled with the promise of new life. See the world with new eyes. We hurtle through the 21st century at the speed of generosity to reimagine a democracy that can finally be realized, an idea whose time has come. The rattle and hum of the metropolis, this conundrum of a city with its complicated history, land of the Osage and the enslaved. Injustices remain. Did the book's printed page come from the lynching tree? Is America the home of authentic liberty? Journey with me down the corridor of memory when I visited the library religiously. There is no frigate like a book. Knowledge accessed freely, allowing me to have lunch with Phyllis Wheatley or to travel to unknown galaxies without ever leaving the room. In the gloom of my loneliest hour, Holden Caulfield comforted me, and Ponyboy Curtis made me feel strong. In the sweet sanctuary of the library, I found solace. I was never really alone. No place other than home ever made me feel so safe. So we give thanks to the humble librarian for offering hope to children who may have had none, or a smile to those who have no home, or a poem to the brokenhearted, drenched in a deluge of tears. All have been comforted these past 150 years Queens and kings, liars and thieves, the peasant and the priest, all cross this threshold looking for something to believe, reason for our existence. Why were we conceived? Is there life beyond this dimension? What can end this grief? Superheroes get all the credit, the glamour, and the girls, but it's really the librarians who are going to save the world. These magical, mystical creatures, like the incomparable Carrie Westlake Whitney, make new worlds available to us without ever charging a fee. On the front lines, they are the ones who define conviviality. They administer a vaccine for the plague of ignorance, contaminating our minds, offering a pathway to the truth all of us long to find. Welcoming each one of us with all our shortcomings, they stand faithfully by our side. No one could ever Xerox the service they provide. So cheers to the Kansas City Public Library on the sesquicentennial celebration. Your commitment to our community has led to constant elevation. Cheers to every branch and all they represent, perched atop the zenith of human accomplishment. May the spirit of conviviality continually fuel your ascent. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the president of the Kansas City Public Library Board of Trustees, Pete Brown. Good old Pete. Pete has been a tireless volunteer and board member for many institutions in town, but his role in leadership at the library has been strong and sure. Pete loves this community and has been a longtime patron and supporter of the library system. Please put your hands together for my friend, Pete Brown.
I don't know about following Glenn. That was amazing. You know, Glenn, our city is fortunate to have you. You're a distinguished poet, an educator, an activist, and you're a wonderful ambassador for our community. I'm fortunate to call you a friend. Good evening. I want to echo my fellow trustee, Denisha Snell, in thanking you for all being here. I'm truly excited for this year-long celebration, and I consider the Kansas City Public Library to be critical infrastructure of an informed and engaged society. Critical infrastructure that has enriched and inspired for now 150 years. Now, I've been the beneficiary of the library for the most recent third of that, with this year being my 50th year as a patron of the library. Beginning with family and grade school visits to the Westport branch growing up, to working on high school research papers in the afternoon at the Central Library when it was on 12th Street, getting help from the wonderful staff with the microfiche machine, the technology, And then as an adult, with evening visits to the Plaza branch, looking through the Thompson registers for potential clients for my fledgling business. Over my lifetime and over the 150 years, the library truly meets you where you are and can take you where you want to be. Libraries, our library, all public libraries, are such an invaluable resource. The Kansas City Public Library is leading attempts to bridge the digital divide. It connects residents with vital social services. It provides health, education, and employment services and resources. And through our nationally recognized signature event speaking series, it serves as a public forum and a classroom for safe and impactful civil discourse, something we need now more than ever. Yes. I want to especially say to the library team, staff, and volunteers, thank you for your dedication and hard work in this celebration, as well as what you do all year long. I'm proud to volunteer alongside you, and as you open the doors each day with opportunities to inform, engage, and inspire our patrons. This year-long 150th anniversary celebration will include individual events at all of our branches, And we have so much more planned for our very popular summer reading program. Tonight, you were treated to the live music of the truly fantastic Fantastics! And you got to taste the limited edition Vine Street Brewing specialty library brew called One for the Books, perfect, as well as Jay Rieger created a specialty cocktail, and that they will be donating a portion of the proceeds to the library. All of that served here tonight. We have a Charlie Hustle t-shirt that you can buy online. And we also have this next summer, this is a year-long event. Next summer you'll have, or this year we have Betty Ray's ice cream celebrating the library. And when you're downtown and see our wonderful streetcar, we have a streetcar adorned with the library logo. Now, none of this would have been possible without the hard work and dedication and passion, as I said, of our library team. And this team knows how to celebrate the library's legacy, but even more importantly, they give their heart and soul each and every day to this community by offering a kind, welcoming, and trusted place for anyone to come and learn, explore, discover, and participate in all that we have to offer. So I'd like to stop and have all of us thank the library team and volunteers tonight. Now, I'm very honored to, humbled to follow Glenn North, and honored to and privileged to introduce to you our keynote speaker this evening. Tommi Laitio is the former Executive Director of Culture and Leisure for the city of Helsinki, Finland. Currently, he serves as the inaugural Bloomberg Public Innovation Fellow at the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation at Johns Hopkins University, where he's studying the potential to transform communities through the design of libraries, parks, and other public spaces for greater conviviality or sociability. Now, he's going to teach us more about that word this evening. During his more than 5-year tenure with the city of Helsinki, from 2016 to early 2022, he oversaw a department that won international and national awards for innovations in youth employment, public libraries, citizen engagement, cultural access, COVID-19 response, and increasingly physical activity. Tommi is a graduate of the University of Helsinki and Aalto University in Espoo, Finland, holding a master's degree in political science and an executive MBA. He has served as a member of the board of the University of Helsinki and Finland's UNESCO Commission, and as the chair of the board for the Finnish Institute in London. What another great gift to our community from the library, bringing us such an innovative and accomplished thinker and civic leader. Please join me in welcoming Tommi Laitio.
Thank you so much, Pete, for that kind introduction. I was listening to that resume and I was like, who is this person? It is truly an honor to be here with you today. I've had yesterday and today the opportunity to see more of this institution, visit some of the library branches, seeing these gorgeous and welcoming spaces for people. I've met dedicated library staff and tons of people who love the library, like you, who show up here today. I want to use this opportunity today to talk about my research and my experience on what makes a great library, where I think libraries are heading, and what does the library need from all of us to be great in the future as well. I come to this conversation wearing 3 hats. The first hat is that I used to work for the city of Helsinki, overseeing libraries, arts, sports, youth work. The mayor called my role often the director of fun for the city. Most days were fun. And really thinking about what would make people open their front door and join public life. And the other way around, what would be the obstacle that people have to not come and join other people. So I've spent most of my career thinking about Like, what are the attractions that people need to take that step out of their front door and live with others? The second hat that I'm wearing today is that of a researcher. So for the last 2 years, I've been looking at the future of parks and libraries around the world. What makes them great, and what kind of support do they need from their community? But I think the most important and the most personal hat that I'm wearing today is that of a former library kid. So I spent a lot of my youth at the library. Some people would call me a nerd. And I've always been a big reader. But then when I reached puberty at, let's say, 14, 15, I started realizing that there's something quite different in me than the other boys in my class. And I kept going to the library trying to figure out, what is this thing why am I feeling like I don't belong? And the library's magazine hall had the national LGBTQ magazine. They're visible to everyone. It took me 4 tries at the library to touch it. I kept going back. I tried to find an optimal moment when no one else was in the magazine hall. And even then, I took the magazine, I put it inside the Finnish equivalent of Time magazine, and I went to a corner that I had strategically chosen so that no one can see what I'm reading. And I opened that magazine. It was super scary. But it opened a world for me. It showed that I'm not alone in being gay. There's other people like me. It might not be that my life is always easy, but there's a place for people like me in the society. And I'm eternally grateful for the library, for that opportunity, that I was given the privacy and access to really explore who I am. And I would say that those miracles happen in libraries every single day. It's not gone away with the internet. Some of those moments are noticed by library staff. In some moments, library staff play an instrumental role in supporting young people, for instance, or other people searching for meaning in their life at the moment. But in many moments, like mine, there was no engagement from staff. It would have been actually a horrifying experience if someone would have intervened at that moment. So talking about the role of these institutions in cities is extremely personal for me. But I want to take you to how I understand what makes a great library. And I want to start 5 years ago. So today is the birthday of Kansas City Library. But today is also the birthday of this library, which is the library in my hometown, the Central Library, Oodi. It's slightly younger than Kansas City Library. It's 5 years old. But opening this building in the center of Helsinki on a freezing winter day is probably the highlight of my public sector career. It was 10 to 20 years in the making. It cost $100 million. It's been the biggest public engagement process in the country's history. And during the first weekend, we had 50,000 visitors in this library, in a city of 650,000 people. During the first year, we had 3.1 million people coming to this library. It went on to win the Library of the Year in the world, and it boosted the library use in our city across all our branches by 40%. So I've seen, and even nowadays, it is the most diverse, the most popular place in the city. It's the place where kids say that, can we go to Oodi? And it's when you have visitors in Helsinki, they are taken to Oodi, and people show at Oodi what we are about as people. If we are at our best, this is who we are. And I often call it like a gas station of hope. That like, when you feel like we can't do this thing called society, you just go there and you're like, oh, I think this might be still possible. And the building carries a lot of symbolism. It was created as a gift from the country to the people of Finland when Finland celebrated 100 years as an independent country. So the gift of the country and the city of Helsinki was to build a public space for everyone opposite to the national parliament, to the way that when you stand on this balcony that you can see there, you stand on the same level as members of parliament. And just to, I assume that many of you have not been to Finland, but I kind of want to highlight why these kind of symbols and reminders that we can do this thing of living together are needed. So these are my grandparents. They were born respectively in 1908 and 1907 in Russia. My country wasn't independent when my grandparents were born. So I come from a country that gained its independence during the Soviet Revolution, and only months after the country gained its independence, it slided into a very bloody civil war, killing tens of thousands of neighbors over land rights and land ownership, to the level that my grandfather that you saw in the previous images, up to the 1950s, kept guns under the bed for the fear that it would escalate again. To the level that people knew for decades who was on which side, which house was on which side during the Civil War. We had concentration camps and people were killing their neighbors. That was the start of an independent country. And it didn't get a lot easier after that. So during the Second World War, Finland was in an intense war with Soviet Union. And as a way to find peace, it lost 25% of its land. My mother's mother, who wasn't in the picture, comes from this area, the red area there in the bottom right corner, where 500,000 people had to abandon their homes and had a couple of hours to pack what they could carry and move to the other parts of the country. People in the other parts of the country had to split their farms to make room for these people who had lost everything. So I think when you say that Finland is the happiest country in the world and one of the most educated countries in the world, it hasn't happened by accident. It has happened by investing in people and understanding that when you're 5.5 million people speaking a bizarre language that no one else understands, you don't really have people to waste. So you have to take care of everyone, and that's why you invest in things like libraries. When the library was opened, I was in my role as the director of fun. I was the first openly gay person in Helsinki's leadership at that time. My political counterpart was our deputy mayor, Nasima Razmyar, who you see in this photo, who was the first person with a refugee background in our city's leadership. So when we were asked by journalists why we need this space, it was very easy for us to understand. Divisions in our society are not gone. That fight for freedom and justice is not over. And there's a lot of us who still want recognition and rights like everyone else. Nasima, her story of libraries was that when her family came from Afghanistan through Russia to Finland, the library was the first place that showed to her that you belong in our community. We trust you. You can take these valuable items home like books. We trust you. You're part of us. My story was the one that I shared with you today. So when the library was opened, New York Times did a big piece on it, and what I said in the interview is what drives me in my current work still. I think most of us here care about things like social cohesion and democracy and community and fairness. But those are not abstract notions. We have to be able to live them out as lived practice. We see on a day-to-day basis if those ambitions are actually true. And it's very difficult for us to believe in an idea of community if there's no spaces where we can come together like this, like us here today. We need civic infrastructure to be able to believe in this idea that we can live together. We need lived experiences for that. So I had been in my role at the city for 9 years when I got a call from Bloomberg Philanthropies, so Michael Bloomberg's philanthropic organization. And they were setting this new center up at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. It's called the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation, where we support cities around the world on better public services and building public trust. And one of the ways that they wanted to link research and practice to each other was a fellowship for public sector leaders to come to an academic environment and do research that matters to cities. And that's what I was invited to, very honored to be invited to that role. And I've spent these 2 years, I've been there nearly 2 years now, on really understanding what makes public spaces work and what do those public space organizations actually need from their cities to function. So I've had the opportunity to talk to library people, park people around the world. I've done research in 6 cities, 4 of them here in the United States, very different cities, and then comparing the US experience to Brazil, the Netherlands, and then also talking to public sector leaders and park and library people around the world, really trying to understand what this institution is actually about. What makes a library? What makes a park flourish? What is it really about? So my work for the last year has looked like this, talking to passionate library people around the world, whether it's library volunteers in a Brazilian square, or whether it's the leadership of Los Angeles Public Library or library staff in Oslo, trying to understand what is the common thread between these. What are these people doing? And because I come from government, how do we explain to other people what these people are actually doing for work? Because I think many of you know that nearly anything can happen in the library, but how do we explain what the institution is about if nearly anything can happen at the library? So like, what is the combining thing between, this is Calgary Public Library, one of the most iconic library spaces from the last decade. Gorgeous building, built with incredible resources. And these volunteers on a Brazilian square where the library is a repurposed kiosk that has 400 children's books that's run by volunteers and open for story time a couple of times a week. What is the combining thing between these things? And one of the things that I've learned is that one of the answers that we try to give now when we say that libraries are so many things is that we say libraries are now more than just books. And if I can ask one thing from you today, is that we give up this statement. Because I understand where it comes from. It's a good intention to say that we do many things, but I think it's extremely problematic as a language. It's adopting a language from like corporate marketing and say, like we say that we are selling you more than an insurance, or this is more than an energy drink, or it's not just a juice. But I don't think that language works for something as valuable, civic commons, as the library. First of all, it devalues books and literature at a time where critical literacy is needed more than ever. It also sends a funny message that libraries are spending tons of money to books, but they're saying we're more than just books. And it comes across as kind of defensive. It sends a message to people saying, you don't really understand what we're doing here. And most importantly, it doesn't really tell what that more is. It just says, we don't want to be what we are at the moment, but we're not going to tell you what we are. And I think we need better answers. And I've tried to make this as simple as possible, explaining what the library is. And this is what I've come up with. I use a metaphor of a three-legged stool to explain what makes a library a library. So the legs are the ones that connect the library to people and the community, and then the seat where this creature sits is how it changes people's lives. And I want to start from the bottom. What are the three legs of the library? So the library is a place. So a library in Kansas City is different than a library in Los Angeles, because it needs to meet the local needs. It has to have an element of what some researchers call there-ness, that it has to be in relationship with the local community. In the same way, a branch library in one neighborhood cannot be the same as in another neighborhood. You cannot copy-paste a library from a neighborhood to another. But being a place also means that people are free to come to the library without any specific need. You don't have to explain to anyone why you're there. That makes it a public space, and that's why people love it. Because you can just come there without a specific need. The second part is that the library provides content. The library allows us to travel in our mind through programming, through literature, through film screenings. It educates us, it informs us, it entertains us. Sometimes it comforts and consoles us in moments of pain. It allows us to go deeper into ourselves and further than we've ever been. And the third leg of the library is that the library provides services. Services that are needed by the community, going from providing Narcan to people who need it to a copying machine. And the idea that you have very different services in the same space, which brings very different people into the library space. And what I've learned in the research is that there's no one way of being a great library. And the wonder and struggle of all of this is that every single library needs to figure out what does our community actually need. And that's why you can't create a good library in isolation. If you look at what's happening in libraries around the world, what I see is that libraries are extremely different from each other. So service can be in a sewing machine in Helsinki. Something expensive that you don't need that often, but you don't want to have it at your home, but it's handy that it's at the library available to you. Or in Brooklyn, the library provides opportunities for parents who are in the prison system to meet their kids at the library, either through Zoom or in-person meetings. In Los Angeles, the library provides pro bono, so free legal consultation for undocumented migrants. In Edmonton, the library provides courses on cooking. It allows, for instance, indigenous communities to share their culture with the rest of the community, but also teach their children, for instance, about their culture. Content in the library can mean, like in Boston, they host the public radio station at the library, so people can watch how radio is made, and they do live question hour with the mayor regularly at the library. In Helsinki, you don't just loan books from the library, you can also loan season tickets to basketball games or season tickets to a symphony orchestra from the library. So giving that access to experience. In Los Angeles, the library understands that in different communities, people want to read different stuff. So in the neighborhood of Pacoima, which is mostly Spanish-speaking, mostly Mexican, they have an incredible collection of romantic cartoons for adults. So Mexican cartoons for adults, which are mostly romance. Or in Oslo, the content can be a big public art collection that allows people to interact with art. Being a place means, like in Charlotte, in North Carolina, they're building a new fantastic library as a way to attract people downtown. In Calgary, the library branches in neighborhood do indigenous placemaking with indigenous communities to remind people that we're not the first ones here. In Fortaleza, they do those kiosks that turn abandoned squares into places for people. In Memphis, the Cossit Library is a place in the sense that it was the first desegregated library in the South. It's manifested through art in the space, but also through their programming. So every single library, you have so many opportunities to be a great library, but you need this combination of service, content, and place. To have that unique combination. If you take any of these out, you lose the wonder of the library. If you take place out, people don't feel that it's not that easy for people to come to library and just like think about what they might need. If you take content out, you lose that ability for people to travel around the world in their mind. If you take service out, then it's kind of just books. So like you have to figure out what this means. That is, I think, what makes a great library. But that is not enough. Then we get to the seat. So what combines these three functions to each other? The one on the left is fairly standard, and it's very much in the tradition of the library. We support people in developing themselves and developing a sense of self, understanding who you are, taking your life forward. But the other part where I think we need to do a lot of work, and I think where the struggles at the moment are in libraries, is teaching people the skills to live with other people. It's the convivencia that Glenn was referring to. This ability, it's a Spanish word, the capability to share space with other people who are very different than you are. And I think the library is probably the best place in our community for learning that. And I'll go more into detail into that. But this sense of self, I think most people who use libraries and love libraries understand this. The British philosopher Isaiah Berlin says beautifully about the sense of self, that a good life is being a subject, not an object. Feeling like you are a somebody and you're treated as a somebody. You're not treated as a nobody or an anybody, but a somebody. Somebody who has specific needs, so specific interests that you decide. And I think any time the library thinks about bringing new services to the library, I think this idea of being able to determine your interests and your level of activity and engagement is really important, crucial for the library. If the library is a space where you come there for one reason and they force you to do something else, you're probably not going to come next week anymore. Like if your idea is to go to the library and read, and then the library director has decided that today we're going to engage every single resident in this compulsory activity, you're probably not going to come back. So that sense of self is I think, very much in the tradition, building people up, allowing people to take their lives forward. But as we see in library spaces now, all around the world, and here, and specifically also here in the US, we have very different ideas of what that sense of self means and how the library needs to serve us. And when you put more and more diverse people with more and more diverse interests into a limited space, we're going to clash with each other. So if one person goes to the library and they want to have a quiet space with no interruptions, and then you have a group of young people who want to blast music or kids who want to run around, that is going to cause friction. And I think that's where the big momentum for libraries is. So we can't just build individuals, we also need to build the skills in those individuals to accept and deal with difference. And the idea that I need to accommodate to the needs of others in this space, that is by definition what public space is about. And the American public space researcher Seth Allow says this very beautifully, that living with difference is a skill that we learn. It's not an attitude, it's not an inherent thing in us that some people are good at in it than others. It is a skill that we have to learn through experience, and we have to constantly practice it. And we learn that through unpredictable situations with others. And she says, I think beautifully, which gets me to that convivencia, it is not that dissimilarities, it is not that our differences dissolve. That is also not the goal. But that we become comfortable with the fact that we have friction with other people. Because that idea that you have slightly different interests than I do is part of being urban. That is what cities are about. That is why most of us, for instance, people like me, from a small town, a young gay man, moved to cities because of that idea that I can choose who I am in the city. I have more opportunities. And I think this is really kind of where we get to the convivencia. So I understand convivencia is a Spanish word and Portuguese word. Is there anyone who speaks Spanish or Portuguese in this room? A few, good. When I've done research in Latin America, people who speak Spanish and speak Portuguese, they understand this word very quickly. And it has very different meaning than the English word conviviality, which is a very difficult word for me as a non-English speaker. Because convivial, as Glenn kind of already referred, convivial, let's be convivial, is like this, like, let's behave. Or let's all act well and be nice to each other. Whereas convivencia is more like, one of my interviews explained it, that it's like dancing. Or you go to a club, the music is great, the drinks are great, you have really fun people around you, but someone might bump into you, someone might step on your toes, someone might spill a drink on you. What do you do in that situation? So it's this space between, it's a joyful space, but it still has friction in it. It still has differences in it. Or another example that one of my interviews used here in the US was that if you think of gathering with your larger family for Thanksgiving, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna be sitting next to that cousin, and we're gonna go back to that conversation that ended up into an argument last time. And we've all traveled far and close to be there. We love these people. We want to have a wonderful time with them, but we are in a limited space with people who have very different ideas on how we spend time together. That is what convivencia is about. And I think when we think about good library spaces as public spaces, we should not strive for harmony. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't think a public space, by definition, in a diverse city can be a harmonious space. If it's harmonious, we've excluded some people already. So we've already created conditions that we've sent a message to some people that you are not needed here. I see this, for instance, in some library spaces that are thinking about how do we attract young people, and then those young people come and they're like, oh, they're taking this space over. So it's convivencia is this idea that it's a lived practice. I constantly need to accommodate to you, and you need to be willing to accommodate to me. But it's also not conflict. We should not end up into conflict. And I would say that many library spaces lately have been spaces of conflict. And it's been exhausting for a lot of library staff to work in those spaces. So we need to equip our staff with the skills for convivencia and our people with the skills for convivencia. And I think libraries can intentionally be those places where we learn those skills. The skills are quite simple, what I would suggest, that libraries kind of would intentionally program into their work, where libraries can make a difference. The first one is attentiveness and curiosity, paying attention to what happens around you without judgment. That's the important part. Oh, they're eating that, interesting. Or, oh, they're reading that, fascinating. Oh, there's more senior citizens in the morning, that's fascinating. Why are those people not coming anymore? And for instance, through programming, we can learn about new cultures, new customs, and create that condition for curiosity. The second is the care for the life of the city. So this idea that we are expressing that we are not here only for our own well-being. I care about other people's well-being as well. And I'm able to put myself in the position of others. And I'm able to look at life from other people's point of view. And I'm able to understand that something that might be easy for me might be an obstacle for someone else. The third one is worldliness, the ability to think and see further than your local confines. When we're in the weeds in our local community, we sometimes need to think about how are other cities doing this? How are people in other spaces learning this? And this is, for instance, where literature plays a huge role. It allows us to travel to other places. Then the fourth one is probably the most difficult one, aversion to the pleasures of hating. So recognizing that hating is a very attractive emotion. When we come across something that we don't like or that we didn't expect, hating is a very attractive emotion. We go very easily, especially when we're stressed or we feel attacked, we very easily start hating. And there's many forces in our society at the moment that are saying, hating is a good emotion, let's act on it. And I think we need to build those skills both in library staff, but also in the people who come to libraries on like, what do we do in a moment where we feel attacked? Or we feel like we are not fairly treated. That happens when you have friction in a space. And then the last one, the image is intentionally like an IKEA how to build a cabinet. So accepting that you live in a world that's somewhat broken. This is not the optimal solution. You don't have all the ingredients available. But how do we do something practical from this? How do we do something together with other people that's pragmatic and takes things forward? I've done most of my career working with teenagers. And for instance, most teenagers now are feeling like an existential threat and fear over climate change. And they feel like they are personally responsible for saving the world. and it's really having a toll on their mental health. So how can the library be a space where you learn about climate change, but you also learn about what other people are doing around it? You can find people who want to take action with you. Like in Helsinki, we have a group that started gathering at the library. It's called Climate Grandmas. And they are building alliances with young people who are passionate about climate. Understanding that it's not only young people who are concerned about this, and channeling that anxiety and fear into pragmatic action. And I would say that if we build these skills into our programming, in our spatial design, into our staff development, we're making a big democratic contribution to our cities. It's not saying that living with difference is easy, but we can be more at ease with unpredictability when we feel like we have the skills to deal with those situations that come. So I would say, based on my research, and I wouldn't tell this to parks people, there is no better learning ground for convivencia than library. Because of the reason that we don't feel judged when we come to the library. We can come to the library on our own terms. And therefore, it creates not optimal, but good conditions for taking in new knowledge and being willing to change our behavior and learning new skills. And I want to kind of highlight 4 things that I think the library could do. I know that there's board members of the library and leadership of the library and staff and many people who love the library, what you can do to take these issues forward. The first issue is support your library staff. It's been really tough through COVID and post-COVID working in these spaces. Aggression has gone up. And I think what library staff would need now is feeling that they are trusted, that they know what they're doing, and they have agency in their work. And that they are respected, and they get appreciation from leadership, from board, from library patrons, and that they feel like their voice matters when you think about the future of libraries. And one of the ways, I want to give you an example. This is from the Helsinki Library. The library is managed with we have a lot of unpredictability in this space, 6,000 to 7,000 people a day. Every day something surprising. And you cannot run a space like this saying, let me go and ask my manager. So the library is run with an idea called self-organized teams. So library staff are divided into teams, thematic teams like adult services or community services or programming, and teams make decisions and inform the manager. Managers don't make decisions. Managers create conditions for the teams to make decisions, but the expectation is that team members inform each other of the decisions they've taken. And that builds agency. All our library staff don't want to work there. But the Helsinki is building this model for other libraries as well, where we understand that there's so much uncertainty, so much need for deciding on the moment what would be the right thing to do here, that we cannot build a guidebook for every single situation. But there's rules for safer space for the library, and then we trust that our staff, together with other staff members can make the right decision in a situation. But it also means that library staff can say, in a difficult situation, saying, could someone else step in? I'm not sure what to do here. So it's also learning that culture of asking for help from your colleagues. The second thing that I would ask is that when you think about the future of libraries need help from the community. Don't leave it up to the libraries to think about what the future of libraries is. And invite the community in. And one of my research examples from this is and I think here the important part is that when we convene to think about what could be the future of Kansas City Library, that we would first focus on differences. Not focusing on solutions, but understanding the differences in how we see this institution. When we gather the public together, making sure that everyone feels heard and their views are documented before we start thinking about solutions. One of the wonderful ways of what happens when you actually focus on understanding the different parties before you start thinking about solutions is the new library that's being built in Charlotte, where after the 2008 housing crisis, the library funding collapsed, and they were very close to closing half of their library branches. What the community foundation did then said, hold on, let's make sure that we know why we need libraries. We're not sure if we have a good answer on why this community actually needs libraries. They built a task force from people from multiple sectors of the society that spent 7 months learning about what the library is about and what people want from the library, and coming up with 39 recommendations to the county and the city saying, this is what we would want the library to be. The fact that you had wide support for the library made it possible that the local authorities felt very comfortable taking things forward, and now they're building a $137 million library, with 65 million of that coming from the private sector. And when I interviewed people, philanthropies or local businesses about it, they say what we are doing here, because they've been involved in it from the very beginning. Same with the community organizations. It wasn't the library going to philanthropies or the community saying, this is what we want and you need to pay for it. But really bringing the partners in from the very beginning. The third thing that I think is needed, because the future is uncertain, is experimentation. Creating resources for the frontline staff at the library to try out new things. And I hate to say it, but you sometimes need money for that. And really testing out new things, not thinking that we know the ultimate truth and we're going to twist this institution around, but constantly testing out new programming and seeing what works and what resonates. Los Angeles Public Library has a program where philanthropy supports micro grants for staff, small grants for staff to try out new things at the library. One of the library branches said, I think we would benefit from a bike to go into community events, to reach out to people and sign up people for the library. And it turned out so successful, that experiment in one library, that now they have a fleet of bikes. But it started not with someone in a corner office saying, we're going to create a library bike fleet. But it was giving a small grant to frontline library staff that could, together with the local community, saying, let's test something out. And I think that's what needed. I think the COVID time has been so hard in libraries that we need those resources and that freedom to try out new things. And the last thing is helping people understand what the library is about. I think if we skip the libraries are more than just books answer, but helping people understand what are really the guiding principles of the library. Why is the library doing a drag queen story time? Or why does the library provide social services? Or why does the library do this? Helping them understand helping the community understand as simple as possible. A lot of libraries around North America have had a lot of challenges to their programming collections over the last years. And I think one of the really powerful ways that Toronto Public Library, the biggest library in North America, has done this, their board approved a document that's called Equity and Intellectual Freedom Statements. That helps every single staff member take a position and defend the policies that the programming and collections that libraries are doing. And I think they very beautifully, in this document, explain what the library is about. They say, ensuring that Toronto Public Library spaces and services provide freedom of expression to all without censorship, ensures that all voices can be heard, including and especially the voices of equity-deserving groups. At the same time, it means that individuals who may utilize the library's services may come across information or ideas they find offensive. And how the city librarian says, we don't censor voices at the library, but we do use the library's voice to amplify those voices that are not heard in our community. When you do that, when you want to be an intellectual freedom institution and you want to be committed to equity, that is going to have friction. That gets me back to that convivencia. So I think if we take the challenge of helping people live together with difference, it's not going to be always easy. And if we want people along with us, all of us who love libraries, to support libraries in being that place where we learn how to live with others, we need to first ensure as a precondition that people feel like they are not judged at the library. And I want to give one book recommendation to you today. There's a wonderful Japanese book that was lately translated into English. It's called What You Are Looking For Is in the Library. And it really, I think, captures what is the magic of libraries. It's short stories of people who are at a loss in their life, or like confused, or something terrible has happened in their lives, and how the library can actually help them turn the trajectory of their life to a different direction in a surprising way. And I think there's this beautiful moment when in one of the essays where this young man living with his mother at the age of 30, not having a job, not in school, goes to the library. The librarian asks, what are you looking for? And he says, I think, captures the sense that I think a lot of us feel when dealing with modern society at the moment. I'm still searching for somewhere I can be accepted as I am. Just one place is all I need, somewhere to be at peace. And if we're able to create that feeling for people, I think people are more willing to learn with us on how to share space with others. If you create that, if you allow people to come into that space, asking questions, maybe even slightly confused or uncertain of what their place is in society. And I want to conclude by taking you back to the Helsinki Library. One of the ways that we communicate in the Helsinki Library that the library is for everyone is through a piece of public art. The library's main staircase that goes through the entire building has a public art from a Finnish artist called Otto Karvonen, who asked the public who the library should be dedicated to. He got tons of suggestions, and then together with a novelist and a human rights expert, he curated 300 or so identities of people who the library is dedicated to. And I think this piece, in many ways, it's quite simple. But if you look at the list of identities, and this is not all of them, it's a mix of identities that are all-inclusive, very small communities. Some are fragile, some are shameful, some are kind of funny, some have prejudice in them, some have brokenness in them. It communicates that we're not expecting you to be at your best when you come to the library. We accept you as you are today. And I think if we manage to carry that message to everyone who comes to the library, then I think we can create those conditions for people to take in new information and respect the rights of others to be treated the same way at the library. Thank you so much for listening. In my own language, kiitos.
Thank you very much, Tommi. If you have questions, we would ask that you please come down and use these microphones at the front so that the people watching at home can hear the question as well as Tommi's answer. We have probably about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for being the first.
You're welcome. I got the pleasure of seeing you at a library conference a couple years ago, so it's great to see you back in Kansas City. I have brought my colleagues from our Parks Department in a neighboring county.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could talk about that connection and how parks and libraries can work together to head toward that conviviality, which I can't say the other word.
Convivencia.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of things that parks and libraries actually have they have many similar features. They are open for everyone. They are spaces that people love. They are public spaces. They have a lot of friction in them. I think we could do much more around seasonality, especially in climates like ours in Helsinki or yours here, that in many things that happen during the summer, for instance, outside could happen more inside inside libraries during the winter. But I think I've been very surprised how in many places there's not a lot of collaboration between parks and libraries. I think it's because one of the reasons might be that libraries are, I think that the kind of the focus of the work is different. I think most of the people who work in libraries work there full time, whereas in parks, a lot of staff there's not staff in every single park at any moment. So we don't often actually see what happens in parks. A lot of park staff is employed on a temporary basis, and they're technical and maintenance staff. So the orientation to people's behavior is different, but I think we could do much more in bringing them together as a public space agenda for the whole city, and understanding that we could think together like what could happen in the library, what could happen in the park. I think the worst thing is that we do competitive programming with limited resources, and then people are confused where they should go. You have a question.
What's your favorite children's book?
What's my favorite children's book? That is the best question. I think my favorite children's book is from an author called Edward Uspensky. It's called Down the Magic River. It's about a grandma and a child who have a house that has legs, and then they travel around the country. It's very good. The other one that I would recommend, which is from my own country, Finland, is from an author called Tove Jansson. They're called Moomins. They are these like trolls. There's a whole series of them. They're kind of funny, and they do things that you're not supposed to do. They're called Moomins, Moomin. Yeah. Please.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for coming.
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate it. This is a big occasion, and having you here makes it an even bigger occasion. So thank you
you so
again.
much.
I wanted to mention that in Missouri, they have a library that is in a park. It's in a nature center, and my kids went to camp there, and it's really great because they have, let's say, reptiles and animals in the library that are, again, at the park. And so, when they have activities that you do that they talk about at the library, and you're right outside, right at the park. And so it really is an intertwined together, these two entities. There is no difference between the park and the library. And so I was wondering if there are other places like that you're aware of.
Thank you for that comment and question, and for giving me more time to answer this question about parks and libraries. In Brazil, they talk about, their concept of library development at the moment in many cities is that they call them park libraries. Okay. So they call them, it's kind of a mix of outside space and indoor space. I think also after COVID, if you look at library design, more and more libraries have also outside spaces, maybe covered, but you can sit outside. For instance, understanding that this idea that library is purely an indoor space is maybe challenged by a lot of design. If you look at, for instance, the Martin Luther King Library in Washington, D.C. was just renovated, and one of their most popular spaces is the roof terrace, which has native plants to the area. It's gorgeous. I think you have a roof terrace here as well. So understanding that the library is not purely an inside space, I think you're seeing that more. I think in other ways as well, I'm seeing more libraries being integrated to other services. Like in Helsinki, we build a lot of branch libraries together with supermarkets, and understanding that it's the same people who go and buy food and go to the library. So it's kind of handy for them that those things are close by. And I think that's the wonderful thing in libraries, that they are at the same time, they are very down to earth for everyone, and at the same time they have that sense of elevation for people. I'll think if I can come up with other models. But I think the Brazilian libraries and Colombian libraries are the ones where I've really seen like doing more the kind of the what they call a park library. And in Colombia, you've also done libraries that are kind of, it's like a campus of several smaller buildings that have like park areas between them. Thank you for that question. Please.
Before I ask my question, I just want to say I love this dedication so much as someone who's a few of the things on there.
Yeah.
I'm one of the people who's helping run this event. But before that, I worked for about 2.5 years at one of our poorest branches here in the system, smack dab in what is quickly becoming one of the most impoverished parts of the Midwest as a whole. And I worked very closely with the YFE department to try to make it as safe and as welcoming an environment for teens and youth as possible. And I've found repeatedly, as I've talked to people who don't work at the libraries, or some people who do, that it's kind of hard to explain what the role of especially a youth section is when it's not necessarily one of the most populated groups in an area or even in a branch. So I was just wondering, because you spoke so eloquently about youth throughout this entire presentation, if you had something to say to sort of help me explain that to others.
I've seen quite a few different ways that libraries deal with youth. I think a lot of libraries still have like youth sections, but I think more and more libraries have moved away from like having it purely focused on books and literature and having it more like a youth club, a youth space. I think I've also seen that libraries hire more people with a youth work or social work background to work with teenagers. So it's also that understanding that every single staff member doesn't need to be able to do everything. That's, I think, also sometimes which exhausts library staff is that you're expected to be an expert in Dostoevsky and youth work. And there are people like that, but not everyone. And then what we did in Helsinki is that we built like one branch that has a youth. Actually, we're building most of our branches lately so that we have a youth club and the library space. There's no wall between them, but they are separate. They're kind of different spaces inside the library, and you build the team so that you have youth workers and library workers in the same team. Understanding that some young people don't want the classical youth activities; they actually want the quiet space to read and so on. I think a lot of libraries have had difficulties with working with young people lately and defending their right to be in the library, because they can be quite noisy. And I don't know if I have I mean, there's no one solution to it. I don't know if you want to continue your question or if I.
The main reason I ask is that we're dealing with something in this state, as well as many parts of this country, where I'm sure you're aware, the ability of youth to access information in these spaces safely and without the thumb of the state stepping in is often a risk, and it's very hard to be able to explain the need of these spaces for teens and other kids to a lot of these folks without like just getting upset, but two, just being able to like explain the need for the teens and for youth to be able to explore these spaces on their own without being constantly supervised, without their reading material being censored. And that's kind of where I've been struggling a lot lately, is because I want to just say you're wrong, just let this happen, let the teens browse. That's not the most satisfying answer to folks. So that's the only reason I ask.
I mean, I come from a very different place. I think it has been, in the Nordics, it's easier for us to defend the right for privacy for young people as well. I don't know if like asking people to reflect on their own youth and the uncertainties that they experienced at that time might be one way of going about it. Maybe also if you can find parents who can have conversations with other parents. So it's not the library staff against one parent, but really kind of thinking about what are the advocates that you need for the work that you, so it's not only you who's advocating for this right of young people. And then of course giving voice to young people themselves. Like allowing young people to share their story in the library space through exhibitions or so on, like why they need it. And then if you are able to find persons who could act as a kind of a broker, adults who are respected by maybe slightly more conservative people, who could tell that story of why young people need that space for self-reflection and search. But I don't think there's an easy way out of this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tommy, we'll go here, and then I have one question from somebody watching at home that we'll end with.
Good.
So my question is about some of the right-wing pushback, like in Russia, they've passed laws that would criminalize everything that you advocated, and same in Hungary. So how is Eastern Europe dealing with right-wing pushback?
I haven't done research in Eastern Europe, so I'm not an expert on this. I think, unfortunately, in a lot of these spaces, library staff are doing this at very high personal risk. I think the situation in Eastern Europe, especially Russia, is terrible at the moment. Like if I go back to my own country at the moment, we've closed our eastern border, more than 800 miles of land border with Russia for the first time during our independence. So no one, because of constant harassment over the border. But I haven't done research lately on Eastern Europe, so I can't give you a very, very detailed answer on this. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Tommy, somebody online wants to know, you're on an elevator with a total stranger, they've never been to a public library before. What is your 60-second pitch to get them to go to their public library?
I would ask, what are you interested in? And then finding a way to link their interest to the library. That's probably 60 seconds is not a lot of time. So like we might need to hold the door for a moment.
I'm going to break my rule and do one more question from a good friend, Laura, here.
Yeah.
As a member of the board, I think we sometimes think about, as you have here 50 things listed and 300 more, do you know, have you heard from other libraries about mission creep, where we have a limited amount of resources, but we want to do it all. We want to be everything to everyone. Do you experience that when you're traveling?
I think all libraries are going through that. What I'm seeing is that some libraries have gotten stuck to kind of the emergency response mode after COVID. I think it's a difficult challenge in American cities when the societal and inequality challenges are in the scale as they are. Like what is the weight that the library can take so that it can also serve the rest of the community? And I know that this is in many libraries, this is also a very difficult conversation internally. As in like, I would say that in most libraries, for instance, it's easier actually at the moment to get funding for those immediate response services than for like elevation and joy and wonder and these kind of things. But my concern is that if we don't make sure that we have sufficient resources for those issues, we lose a large part of the public. So if the library just only becomes a place for those who have no other place to go, it doesn't It doesn't play a role in the lives of most families, most residents, and it loses the popular support, because I think the popular support comes through use. So I think, for instance, the fact that you do these kind of like programming is really important. Understanding that all library users don't have to be interested in the same stuff. But I think the mission creep, which for most people means that you take everything in, and you're like, oh, we can do that, and we can do that, and we can do that. It stretches your team to such limits that it's very difficult actually to retain staff and attract staff anymore. So I think the thing that I would do when you start thinking about taking on a new service, first taking a moment to see like who else is active in this space. And I think sometimes libraries skip that. And we're like, oh, we can do that as well. Rather than thinking of whether we can actually give space to someone else to do it in our buildings, or whether there's actually a non-profit with moderate support from the public sector, they could actually handle this work. So I think the library should never think about its service offering in isolation from other organizations. So every time when you do think about taking on new work, asking that question of like, who else is doing this? And I think we sometimes skip that. We're so eager to jump into the opportunities, and there's such an eagerness in libraries to help that we try to take on everything because of the generous nature of the library. But I think it's also the job of the board to make sure that you hold the popular support for the library and you're relevant to everyone in your community. But you understand that everyone doesn't need to use the library in the same way. That's the best answer that I could give.
Thank you, Tommi. Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight to celebrate our 150th birthday. We really appreciate it. Have a great night.